Quadeca just released Album of the Year. That's right, the guy who was making KSI diss tracks 4 years ago, the guy who made Wii Music Fire.
Extreme, so prominent and dominant in making big dreams. I'm seeing aliens.
That guy, in my opinion, has just released the best bunch of songs this year. Just to reiterate, Quadeca has outdone Kendrick Lamar, Drake, 21 Savage, Kid Cudi, Flo Milli, and every other rapper that's dropped in 2022. You get the idea. And obviously Joji, but that one kind of goes without saying. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Smithereens was pretty well. Now, I actually enjoyed From Me to You, Quadeca's last project, quite a bit, much to the detriment and surprise of my close friends who still see Quad as a lyrical miracle YouTube rapper. A presupposition I don't think anybody in their right minds would insist upon now. From Me to You has some great moments, some good rap, and a lot of atmosphere. A lot of the verses were pretty cold, and the concept was fairly novel and interesting. Unfortunately, however, none of the tracks quite lived up to the grandiose and triumphant nature of Sisyphus. And despite some great tracks like People Pleaser and Burning Bridges, the album was rather inconsistent and corny at points, webbed by the trappings of relative internet fame, as well as some tracks like Where'd You Go just being straight up bad. I think what this album did most prominently, however, was display that Quadeca is an incredibly impressive self-producer, which is something that is not only easier to see in this latest album, but also something that's improved tenfold. Like, I'm talking Tyler the Creator levels of self-production here at many points. On top of production, suffice it to say the man's singing has also improved drastically on this project, which adds so much power and quality in songs like Fantasy World, which is a contender quite frankly for one of the best indie folk tracks in years. I'm so shocked by how much better this is than everything Quadeca has worked on previously, and it's a shock that was only strengthened by the admittedly somewhat slow start to I Didn't Mean to Haunt You. Whilst I don't think there is a single bad or underwhelming track on this thing, I do believe that the first 4 songs or so are significantly weaker than the entirety of the second half. Let's have a quick look at this hunk of art track by track, and discuss both the quality of the music as well as the myopic and introspective, downright intelligent concept the album insists upon. We begin with Sorry for Dying, in my opinion intended to be a compilation of Quadeca's first thoughts after having committed suicide, the act of which being presented by the intentionally messy and loose instrumental that opens the track, only to strip back to more simple and less layered piano chords very abruptly, so that us listeners have no choice but to really listen to the lyrics and vocals which begin here.
Come to think about it, it's all in my head.
It's imperative that we hear what is being said. This is a very decent opener sonically, but I can't help but detect just a tad of the corniness that resides in his previous project, trying just a little too hard, with production that I feel should have been pulled back slightly. The old less is more saying. These feelings are only very slight, however, and it's more of an issue in tracks 3 and 4, which I will get to very soon. Tell Me a Joke is undoubtedly the best of the first 4 tracks, and one of my favourite songs of the year. The beginning presents a childlike and witty sense of fun, which plays so perfectly against the otherwise serious and dreary tones the rest of the song emits, and also a look into Ben's more fun-loving and playful, almost nerdy personality in real life. Knock knock, who's there? In the context of the concept, Quadeca is searching for people in the afterlife, who is waiting at the door to greet his spirit. Well, as it turns out, there isn't anyone there, because all he can hear is the crickets.
All I could hear were the crickets.
An excellent play on the theming of comedy, as well as the album's concept. The ending to this song, with the distorted, cackling howls of laughter drowned in reverb, is my favourite part of the track, and does a brilliant job wrapping the whole thing together, as it's followed by a more powerful version of the chorus. Don't Mind Me comes next. Don't mind me, I'm somewhere in between. He's neither alive nor dead, heaven or hell. He's somewhere in between, stuck in limbo, whether it be due to the recency of his death, the ambiguity of his morals and sin throughout his life, or the questionable nature of how suicide should be treated, especially in this case when the motives and circumstances surrounding said suicide are unknown. He looks back on his life in the next track, Picking Up Hands, a retrospective insight that begins with touching the ground, pick up my hands, then I turned around, covered in skin, recounting his own birth, rebirth, a direct juxtaposition to his death in the first song. He goes on to revel in nostalgia at the sight of his childhood home and old bedroom, the poster on the wall, the dust on the floor, etc., etc. It ends with an unsung and blunt proclamation of the narrator's feelings as he regrets his final decision, as it hadn't delivered the conclusivity that he was hoping for. He thought by killing himself he'd have all the answers, but evidently from this outro, it didn't quite work out that way. Thanks for playing, this is what the game was. The conclusivity and devastation of his actions have finally settled in, and he's realised just how drastic and dramatic his final act was. I think that these two tracks have some of the best lyrics of the entire album, however I do have a slight issue on the production side of things. There's so much noise and pure stuff going on that I can't help but feel as though it really wants you to feel something. However, in basically begging and prodding at you to get emotional, it does the exact opposite for me. So whilst I can certainly enjoy the pretty sounding music, it doesn't quite strike me as powerfully as the rest of the record does. This is the turning point, however, I feel. This is like the Othello Act 3, Scene 3 of this album. The peripeteia, if you will. Okay, my bad, I'll stop being a pretentious, twatty English teacher. Basically, Born Yesterday is brilliant and fixes all of the problems and gripes I had with the previous tracks. And this improvement seeps into every song after this as well. The main theme of this song is Quadeca being dead and seeing the people he loved grieve. In this line, the idiom "I wasn't born yesterday" expresses how Quadeca isn't naive and knows his mother is hurting despite her pretending to be okay. Although he's accepted his death, he acknowledges the doubts he had surrounding him, wishing that those doubts had won over him and he didn't go through with it. The ending was so earned, and I love how the instrumental shapes itself around the line "I think you're goddamn lying," really punching it in as the song progresses. I actually sent Quadeca some messages on Instagram when the single was released, and I feel as though these do a good job explaining how I feel about this tune. He never ended up seeing it though. I guess he just hates his fans. The Memories We Lost in Translation is exactly what this album needed, and seriously adds to the beautiful atmosphere the project goes for, with only a couple of profound lines about grief, but it's mostly just a really lovely sounding interlude that once again lacks any of the minor gripes I had with the production of some of the earlier tracks. Me and JJ had a chat and I think he describes the song pretty well. It really does have a melancholic vibe that makes you feel as though you're floating. Much like this character is floating through limbo. It's powerful and satisfying without being too stiff. Honestly, sounds amazing. Ooh, baby, where do I even begin with house settling? I guess I'll just start with my interpretation. It begins by outlining the newfound loneliness that Quad feels in the afterlife. The same loneliness that perhaps motivated the suicide to begin with. Home sweet home, I can't stay nowhere else. I cuddled up in the vase on the shelf. Ashes, ashes, a place to myself. I feel as though this is a pretty clear reference to his mother having cremated him and placed him on the shelf in the house that he loved so much, spurring on a sense of comfort, lulling the listener into a false sense of security with its euphoric and magical instrumental, before laying it upon us with this. Danny Brown's feature propels this song to sublime levels, rapping from the perspective of carbon monoxide from the oven that Quadeca's ghost let fill the house so it could kill them, revealing the method of suicide as the album slowly reveals the details of the initial tragedy. It's such a unique idea, like how do you even think of this stuff? This uniqueness is also aided alongside the production, and it would have been really easy for this sudden change in pace to be jarring, but it brings it together brilliantly. The more you think about this song, the smarter and more innovative it gets. Knots is honestly one of the greatest bangers in years, and provides a fantastic change of pace. I just love the weird suffocating breaths near the beginning that symbolize the dying final breaths and inhalations of carbon monoxide. This is like a death grip sort of sound on their greatest produced project. I struggle slightly more to derive a clearer meaning from this, but I don't even care purely because of how hard it sounds. I just love it so much. I will talk about two lines that do pique my interest, however. Those being, "You told a story and you got to my name and it made you flinch. I became your stutter, I became a knot, I became a glitch," which describes how Quadeca's name has now become a touchy subject due to his death in the real world, and the implications surrounding it. There's also the line, "In my chest, no matter how hard my lungs try, knots on my neck, try to speak but I'm tongue-tied," where the motives behind his suicide become far clearer, as he failed to vocalize the issues he was having in his life, the loneliness he felt, all so difficult to express for whatever reason, but all just bottled up until finally releasing with his dramatic end. The sound of this one in particular is just so addicting. I think this might be my favourite song on the record, but to be fair I could say that about like 5 songs, so I really don't know. Next is the aforementioned Fantasy World, where the raw vocal performance and simple piano chords convey an incredibly powerful emotion. The lines "I heard there's a place for me, one that nobody knows, one that goes away with me," are the narrator expressing their desire to finally transcend into the afterlife, sick of being stuck as a ghost, forced to watch the world he lived in, but unable to interact with it in the way that he once could. The depression and desperation is characterized by the soft and somber introduction, but as the character gets more frustrated and bitter with his newfound supposedly everlasting fate, we get this. When there's nothing to say, there's no point anymore. The words touch your mouth and they fall to the floor, so why try to move a hair when you barely exist? Quadeca's ghost not only has lost the ability to speak, being a ghost, but doesn't have anything left to say anyways. His soul has been emptied so much from the pain of his life and his experiences, after that he struggles to find anything that adds meaning to his paranormal existence. As the anger fades away, he returns back to sad and hopeless as he outlines his desire, yet failure to finally ascend in the outro. We're then treated to a couple minutes straight of pure noise with no vocals at all, a little insight into the life that this character is living, and one that would have been a lot more boring if the production and instrumentation wasn't as beautiful and poignant as it is. The soaring production and trademarked Quadeca glitches, as well as his clear, vast knowledge of music theory, combined with his creativity, make such consistently complete and satisfying holistic listening experiences. Fractions of Infinity, as the title implies, is all about how we're all a small part of something far bigger. No matter how much we do or work, we're all limited by the ceiling of what humanity can achieve, and no matter what is said, it will never be enough to emphasize just how grand the scope of the universe is, or just how hefty Quadeca's emotions are, hence the repeated lines from the Sunday service choir in a great ending to the track. Those words don't do you justice. The instrumental, weirdly enough, has a Radiohead vibe to it, and I think it works in a similar way to how a song like No Surprises works, but a folktronica, more indie-fied version of it. I really enjoy the strings for this one in particular though. They do work pretty well in every song. I remember Tell Me a Joke did a good job using them too. They're pretty subtle at points, but they add a lot of power. You can really feel every ounce of heart, time, and passion that Quadeca put into this hugely ambitious listing of tracks. The Cassini division is a region between two of Saturn's rings. From Earth it appears as a thin black gap in the rings. The rings represent a static that is in between, referencing Quadeca's dissolving into nothing but static between the world of living and the afterlife. Some may interpret this as him finally reaching the transcendence he had yearned for previously. This admittedly isn't a song I would choose to listen to isolated, but I don't think that's the point, and in the context of this album, I wouldn't even consider skipping it for a second, as it's a vital part of the experience. And that's what this album is over anything else, an experience, and a really, really good one as well. Throughout the entire album, Quadeca does a really impressive and I'm sure fulfilling job creating his own sound, based upon the many inspirations you can hear at points. I really do love this song despite not deciding to play it in isolation. It really does add so much to the experience and I'm very glad that it's on here. Brilliant closer. I've already mentioned Death Grips and Radiohead, but there was also a lot of Igor in there, and I actually think I prefer this album to Igor. In pretty much every aspect. I can't believe I just said that about the author of Voice Memos, which I actually just re-listened to. And yeah, it's nowhere near as impressive or listenable to this one obviously, but you can tell just how much the man puts into everything he's ever made, and how much every song means to him. You can tell that Voice Memos provided such a strong basis for Quadeca to improve from, and that's even more prevalent in his second studio album, From Me to You. Safe to say he's grown up and progressed to a stupid extent in a crazy short amount of time. Probably due to his crazy dedication and hours put into his work, claiming to have spent something like 15 hours in the studio daily, losing like 40 pounds in the creation of this project, allowing him to shoot past most other musicians. I'm actually a little worried the pressure gets to him a little after this album, because of the insanely good response it's getting, even if it is entirely deserved. I just hope he doesn't kill himself trying to top this. The guy needs to just chill for a little bit, or at the very least work a lot less, because goodness gracious me, he has earned it. I'm giving I Didn't Mean to Haunt You by Quadeca a 9 out of 10, as well as probably album of the year, unless something mental happens in the next month and a half. I very much hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's a little different from what I usually talk about, but don't worry, I'm not a music channel or anything now, though I would like to talk about it every now and then. And hey, there's a whole album movie, so technically I'm just reviewing a movie and focusing very heavily on the soundtrack, right? Anyway, a subscription, like, and comment as always would be very much appreciated. Much love to you all, and I'll catch you in a bit.
Actually, shout out to my mom behind the camera. That's what true rappers do. They pay homage to their mothers. She's a great woman. No, but for real though, she actually is.